Hello and welcome to Business Brews. My name is Abby Davis with the Easton Center for Career Readiness at the Spear School of Business, and we're so excited to kick off this new event with you today. Business Brews is a new series that we're launching at Spears Business, where the first Wednesday of every month during the semester, we'll visit with and brew up all kinds of ideas with executives, alumni, and friends of the Spear School of Business. And today, we'll be brewing up ideas about some key leadership philosophies and principles that have stood the test of time for thousands of years. As some of you may know, the Easton Center for Career Readiness was developed based upon Joe Easton's passion for developing the next generation of business professionals and leaders at Oklahoma State University, and we're honored to help execute that vision. Our speaker today is Justin Stead, CEO of Radley London, and Justin also serves on our Easton Center Advisory Board. Justin shares Joe's passion of developing the next generation of leaders, and in 2018 founded the Aurelius Foundation with a focus on educating our youth on the principles and values of Stoic philosophy. Justin will share more about the Aurelius Foundation here with us in just a moment. Justin was born and raised in a small town in Queensland, Australia, and he started his career in the United States after graduating with an economics degree from Oklahoma State University and a master's degree of business administration from the University of Texas. While at OSU, Justin was one of our star tennis players and was ranked top 10 in the nation at the NCAA level and was ranked at one point in the top 400 tennis players in the world for the ATP Tour. Justin worked and moved through the ranks of a number of best-in-class retail and branded organizations in the United States before transitioning into several executive global leadership roles. Thanks to technology, Justin is joining us today from the UK, and we're so thankful to have him as our first Business Brews speaker. Justin, welcome.
Abby, thank you so much. I'm just sharing my screen, so I hope everyone can see. We're going to take a few minutes today and walk through just a series of slides and around various ideas, and then we're going to open up to questions with Abby and I in about 25, 30 minutes. But with that in mind, it's a great honor to kick off this series, this event series that the Easton Center is a part of, and that OSU is a part of. It's always great to come back and be involved in any way with the OSU community. In Australia, and a great privilege and great honor to come to the United States in 1988 in the fall and begin a scholarship at Oklahoma State. That was just such a remarkable opportunity, but I'll talk about that more in a moment. I think when we talk about jobs and careers and leadership and so forth, really from my standpoint, I've never really thought about having a job. It's not to say that I didn't have them. It's to say that I've really looked at my career and building leadership impact around enterprise. And most of the things that I've done over the 30 years of my career have been involved in enterprises over extended period of time. When I worked at the Fossil Group, that was almost a 10-year journey. And then I came to the UK and worked on a business with three fantastic brands, Watches of Switzerland, Mappin & Webb, and Goldsmiths. Enterprise. And nowadays I'm involved with Radley, but I do multiple ventures and multiple entrepreneurial pursuits. But Radley's in the midst of year 5. We probably would have been exiting that business this year or next year, but due to the pandemic, we're going to be, in this business a little bit longer. But I always think about when I'm talking about career development and people ask me about building that career, I think to think about enterprise. And I've been very privileged to work all around the world and do different things and use business, or in the early days to play tennis, to expand those horizons. And nowadays my biggest focus is, yes, still very interested and enjoy working in business and around people and people that I trust. But I started my journey on a personal level with my family a little bit later in life. So my family is a huge and important focus for me at this stage of Abby touched on the start, the Aurelius Foundation. This was something that my wife and I started in 2018. We wanted to start a journey where we were giving back and thinking about what we were going to do. Life has been exceedingly good to me, and I'm extremely grateful for all the good times, for some of the challenging times, and the journey that I've been very fortunate and very grateful to undertake. So we began thinking about how we would start to give back. And I think when you're thinking about how you want to give back, there are the obvious things around financial and charity and work like that. But we thought a little bit broader in the sense of what we wanted to do. So my wife and Natalia and I said, why don't we begin this foundation for various reasons around Stoicism? If you can give back and give back passionately, that's really you're winning on. It's always easier in some ways to give money in some respects, but giving time and energy and passing on your experience, that's more meaningful. It has a greater sustainability, especially if the timing is right, if you meet the right person at the right time. I can certainly attest to the people that invested in me over the years that made huge impact because they invested their time, whether it was mentoring, opening up an opportunity, or an introduction. The foundation really centers on a number of things, but to mention three of them here a little bit more briefly, is the foundation does stand for all things Stoic. Many on this webinar today, you'll know Stoicism, you'll be aware of it, you've heard of it, you've heard of the principles in it. We'll talk about a few of those in a moment. But we talk about trying to make Stoicism much more aware and the pursuit of virtue in the frame of the four cardinal virtues, which is really wisdom, just courage. That sounds rather grandiose in its academic sense in some ways, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. But our vision is to share more awareness around Stoicism. Second, on the business front, we believe, and the team involved here, we are very committed to introducing Stoic awareness into the business community, into CEO engagement, into senior leadership engagement. And we'd like CEOs to come to our events to engage with the foundation and ask them and discuss with them and challenge them to consider Stoic thought in the development of strategic visions, teams, and plans, and how they engage their business on a day-to-day basis. And then thirdly, we want to attract Stoicism to a younger audience and bring it to a younger audience. Very often, it's quite interesting that people find Stoicism when the wheels have come off, when things have gone drastically wrong, when they're looking into tragedy. And Stoicism has been around for thousands of years. We're just a beacon of. But if you can come across Stoicism early, and we believe if we can bring it to a younger audience, that can have tremendous value as they think about their life, the education of higher principles and Stoic philosophy, and also how they may look at their life and how their life can build into being not only moving ahead, but a life that really can contribute to the greater good. And we think about that a lot in the activities that we do. We conduct seminars and webinars, and we do educational programs. We've got mentorship programs that's really kicking off this year. We have a rich digital library that we're creating from Stoics in all sorts of
We're having some connection issues. Justin, you're breaking up just a little bit. Justin.
The foundation, as mentioned, we are engaging a lot in business. We have Stoic wellness weeks for employees and teams. We have leadership conferences, one-day seminars, and different things that we want to engage various people throughout the different parts of an organization in Stoic thought and awareness, not only on the personal side, but very much in the engagement of teams and strategy and daily execution of the business. So before I go a little bit more into Stoicism, I did want to reference the Easton Center and its partnership with the Aurelius Foundation and our support of it. OSU was extremely good to me, and I'm not overemphasizing that. To be plucked out of where I was at that stage of living in Europe, but being from a small town in Queensland, Australia, and the ability to go to OSU and all the things that OSU gave me at the time, an education, framework, an opportunity to be across all parts of the United States and begin a career. But it's really the relationships that have really stood the test of time. And, I never would have imagined that I would meet someone like Joe Easton in the fall of 1989 when we were both freshmen and sophomores. And we've built a lifelong partnership together, the best in friendship. And we have seen each other through the best of times, more challenging times, during our business careers, during our personal transitions and the seasons of life. And it's been a remarkable friendship. So it's a great honor to be on the Easton Center board and support the whole team. And the Easton Center's vision of career readiness, I couldn't endorse that vision anymore. And the foundation looks to be a great honor that Joe as a best friend. But also, it's not only Joe. When I look at all the relationships that have been forged over the years from Oklahoma State, whether it's Robin Scott, John Redding, Todd Hudgens, Raj Basu, Greg Mosier, Julie Connolly, Brian Callahan, and my graduating semester in Japan with Andy Urich. This is 30 years ago. And I would really, the students that are listening to this today, you can't imagine that you're looking around, that the people that you're in class with, that you're engaging with, that you're having all sorts of different activities and having fun with. If you can hold those relationships for 30 years and you can end up with a friendship that I have with Joe and the people that I mentioned, that is the great gift of Oklahoma State. And it continues to keep on giving. Oklahoma State comes to London every year. I look forward to seeing the business classes when they come through. I'm very privileged to be involved in helping Chris Young, and I've got some vision to help to me. Events like today, and even recently in the last few years, getting to know President Hargis and Anne has been a real privilege, and looking forward to seeing more support coming to OSU as the years go on. So moving then into just some very brief discussion around Stoicism, and I think if Dean Cooch is listening from the Arts and Science College, I think he'll be somewhat relieved to hear me say that I'm certainly no academic on Stoicism or philosophy. I was a philosophy major for a little while at Oklahoma State. But rest assured, Dean Kurtz, that everyone is safe there. But I think it's important that we touch on a few points, which is quite interesting in how it ties into how we operate the foundation, but also how we operate and integrate our philosophies into youth development and into business. A businessman, a family man, an aspiring Stoic, certainly not a professor of Stoicism. But the great thing about Stoicism is it's incredibly pragmatic. It's has a great methodology about it. And that's one of the most appealing things to me, is the ability to be effective and efficient and enjoy life in all aspects of life. And Stoicism brings that to you. And this fantastic quote by Richard Sorbes, who's a mentor to John Sellers, who's one of the leading academics in our team and one of the leading academics in Stoicism around the world. This is a fantastic quote, which really sums up what Stoicism is really about. It's not a matter of gritting your teeth. It is about seeing things differently so that you don't need to grit your teeth. And that's a very powerful quote, because sometimes I think Stoicism gets a bad rap. It's people hear that someone's a Stoic, or they're taking a Stoic approach, and that they only accept things. They only take things on as is. They don't necessarily rattle the cage or try and make adjustments, that they adapt to things very readily. And that's just not the case. When you understand Stoicism, its deeper thought process and how it applies, Stoics are very proactive, very positive. Acceptance is a part of the understanding around control and the dichotomy of control. But Stoics are also very zestful people, because they have the ability to move on into more positive and proactive parts of their life, but also the ability to back off and move on, but move on without regret. And as a senior business leader, you have to be able to do that on a continual basis, that you're moving forward, taking the positive, the opportunities with you, but not getting bogged down and being inefficient in things that may not be as productive, and without regret. we'll touch a little bit and to talk about Stoicism and its highest purposes, which is the pursuit of virtue. Now, that does sound rather grandiose. And if you talk about wisdom, justice, temperance and courage, and these characteristics, yes, grandiose, but another way to think about it in a more grounded way, if you will, is that wisdom, what is that? That's the good use of experience. Justice, what is that? Well, fairness. Temperance, what is that? In a modern sense, that's a bit more moderation. And courage, in the sense of what is that in today's world? Well, courage has many aspects to it. But in one respect, as far as I see it as in business, it's the ability to execute a strategy, but it's also that very important word for leadership, integrity. What really is it? Yes, virtue is a very strong and grandiose word, but it's also the development of character. And that's what Stoicism does on a daily basis. We're willing to go to the gym and we're willing to run and work our bodies to be fit and healthy. We're willing to do all sorts of other things. If we want to learn tennis, we go practice. If we want to be good in the stock market, we learn from a broker. But where is your daily gym of character development? And that has always been one of the most attractive things about Stoicism. Every day I'm in the gym, and what Marcus Aurelius talks about, the inner citadel of developing yourself and bringing self-empowerment to your life. And as a business leader, I find that very, very inspiring. So moving into some discussion very quickly around the Stoics and what they are. And I've listed here that are quite interesting. First of all, Epictetus, who was around about 135 AD, Marcus Aurelius in the middle, and Seneca on the end here. And the reason I'd like to bring these into the discussion is that Epictetus, I would almost say, is the chairman, if you will. He's very well, the higher level of pure Stoic thought. He had an interesting life. He was a slave who got to the highest levels of education and stewardship of Stoicism at one of the peaks of the Roman Empire. And he's very famous for, challenging an individual that, happiness is a trained event. It's an outcome. And it's wholly dependent on you. And when we talk about happiness in those days, they were talking about things that were, not the lighthearted happiness, happy, smiley. It was about calmness, about resilience. So this quote is very powerful. Your happiness depends on three things, all of which are within your power: your will, your ideas concerning the events in which you're involved and the things that happen to you, and how you interpret or how you take on those ideas. And again, if you bring that into business, that's something that leadership every day has to deal with and be effective and not be overly affected by the things that are happening on a day-to-day basis. So Epictetus is a huge figure in the field of Stoicism. If you talk about Seneca, he's my favorite, and there's many reasons. He had choices in life, though, because of his choices. He didn't have to do. He could live the life, and he chose to work with one of the most difficult history of Nero. Nero for a number of years, and during that period, he wrote an extensively on Stoicism, but in a particular and very well known series of letters to what I would call his mentee, Lucilius. Now, the interesting thing is we don't have all of them. We probably have about a third of them, but they touch on every aspect of the human condition, and it's absolutely remarkable. So he had a very challenging life as well. He was wealthy, but he was not a well man either. So he had a lot of physical conditions he had to deal with. And on a daily basis for a period of time, he was working with a psychopath, extremely volatile individual, and also within a court system that was very difficult as well. But he lived a Stoic life. He wrote extensively about it. He walked the walk, And in the end, he was instructed by Nero to commit suicide. He was implicated, probably wrongly, in a plot of assassination, and he died as a Stoic, and not an easy death either. So when I think about it as a CEO and all the constituents that a CEO has to manage, I often refer more to Seneca than I do to Aurelius in some ways. Talking about Marcus Aurelius then, a very interesting life as well. So he was a very bright young boy and was recognized very early that this was something very special. He was from a very successful family. They were the brick builders of and a brick source of Rome, in fact, and Hadrian's emperorship often bought the materials from this family. So he went through. He was identified very early as a special young man, and he was adopted into the imperial family during the reign of Hadrian. And Hadrian was determined that this young man would one day sit on the throne and become the emperor. So he was moved quickly through the cursus honorum of the Roman system, and he took a lot of positions earlier than he was really qualified for, and certainly by age. But eventually, after Hadrian died, there was a holding emperor in Antonius Pius, and on the first day, when he became emperor, after Antonius Pius died, he immediately shared power with his brother, which was never done before up to that point, which the most powerful man on day one insisted to the Roman Senate that he would not accept the role unless he could hand half of the administration of the empire over to his brother, Lucius Verus, which was amazing. And again, Aurelius had a very difficult life. Again, particularly well, and the last years of his life were physically very demanding. And in the end, he died of the plague as well. And instead of living in Rome in a life of luxury, he spent most of it on the Danube fighting the German tribes, trying to just hold on to Rome's borders at that point. But he does go down as one of the greatest Roman emperors, in my mind, second only to Augustus. And he wrote that very famous book, which is very famous, and we're very fortunate to have it. And it's one of the most famous books in the Western canon, called the Meditations. It was a private notebook of Stoic thoughts that he wrote on a daily basis. And as a leader, as the CEO of the Roman Empire, you can look into the mind of that leadership style and profile. You could clearly see he had difficulty with people. He didn't get on with people so well, and his repetitive nature that he must challenge himself to get on with people. If you go to get on with people, he knew his duty. He talks about at different times of getting out of bed, and it's a cold winter's morning, but he got out, and he got out early, and he did the things he had to do. And that's, again, a sign of great leadership. So those are the three interesting leaders that we focus on, and we do a lot of work with, and sharing their styles of leadership within the foundation. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the effects of Stoicism. We do a lot of work within the foundation to show that the benefits of Stoicism, and results, data, surveys that we continually take shows that Stoicism really does impact people in a very positive way. We know this through the surveys that we take in our wellness weeks for business. They increase positive emotions, they increase resilience, general life satisfaction, and they also reduce a lot of negative emotions. And following Stoic ideas will benefit both personally, but also help you in what we believe in Stoic approach in business life and interactions with other people, especially if there's Stoic leadership involved, and the foundation believes in that. So some of the data that we're pulling together is very, very interesting. When you think about Stoics in business, these are some of the things that we think are very, very important for Stoic leadership, and they exhibit the finest points of Stoicism. First of all, great leaders have excellent emotional control. As Seneca says here, man is affected not by the events, but the view he takes of them. And CEOs and senior leadership positions and anyone in a management role needs to take that on board and have a pause moment and see what's happening before they necessarily make a decision. Second, the view from above. As a CEO, it's important to get into the detail at times, but it's also important to stay at the right level to move the whole business down consistently, down the pitch, if you will, and to see things happen in a coordinated way to realize the agreed upon strategy. So staying at the right level and seeing the world at the right level, but also having the ability to go up and down into the details required is really important. But maintaining that focus view, that view from above, is very important. Stay consistent in process. Often good CEOs and good senior leaders, they're very good at staying disciplined. They stay in a process. They're building something over time. I often talk about CEOs and business leaders when they're like directors. They're building a story over time, and it doesn't just come overnight. And certainly with the disruption of the entire world with the COVID-19 pandemic, getting back into new process is going to be something very interesting that we're all going to have to engage and look into the future. We are still locked down here in London in the next few weeks. So it's been very, very interesting to approach the new ways of working and new processes that we will build. Number 4, understanding what you control. I do think CEOs at times, they get too much credit when it goes right, and they get the short end of the stick when it goes wrong. There's a great book I was reading recently from a US general, Stanley McChrystal, talking about the over emphasis of why CEOs or leaders get so much success when it all goes right. There's so many factors, but really when you think about it, CEOs don't have as much control as people really think. Good CEOs have great governance. They have to answer to boards. They answer to employees. They have different things that go on. That the dichotomy of control is in play all the time. And knowing what you can control, what you can't, and how you can move a business forward is something that's really interesting from a Stoic. And ethical values and implementing them into business, that's hugely important from a Stoic perspective as well. Epictetus explains very clearly that virtue promises happiness, prosperity, peace, and progress. And if you look at that from a business perspective, harmony is victory. If you can bring a team together, if you can make them harmonious, if you can believe that they're doing something above themselves in an ethical way, people really, really bring their best and bring their greatest energy. And then finally, from a Stoic perspective, creating harmony and teamwork. Whether you're in the business or as an individual, or you're as a global citizen, it's really important that you're creating that opportunity of understanding of harmony, because Stoics believe that we are social beings. So the business is a social engagement, and the business interacts with the world. So it's very important that everything works together harmoniously, but we are all part of something bigger than ourselves. Some of the themes that we try to bring in. And then finally, on a couple of points here, we're talking about the greater good in Stoic leadership. It's very important in the enterprises that I've been involved in over the years that the people that I was working with, around, and for, that they showed that they were inspirational people, but they were great people. They were people I admired. And their businesses not only provided a business outcome, but what they also provided was jobs, real engagement, a lot of fun. They brought a lot of energy to the table every day, and energized people to come more out of themselves. That's not to and in the 3
Bear with us just a moment.
good discipline.
There, Justin, can you hear us?
Thank you. I think we might be back in there. Can you hear me now, Abby?
Yes, I can. You're good. Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you again. Sorry about that. And then the second part of this is once you have alignment, consistency. That leadership, and the Stoics believe in daily review, continual review, and being very consistent on a long-term basis. So the great thing about Stoicism on your personal side is that it gives you the opportunity to repackage your past, to look into your past, repackage it, order it, understand it, the good, the bad, the ugly. That allows you then to look into the future and then make adjustments in your behavior. And then that allows, when you have that, the past repackaged, the future better understood where you want to go or how you want to behave, that allows you to live more fully in the moment. Now, if I use that analogy, exactly the same in business and in business leadership, always recognizing the lessons from the past, good things we want to accelerate, things we want to stop. That helps you move confidently into the future and therefore execute the plan today. And that's something that's very important. And then closing, before we really start to move into some Q&A here, just two more slides really to go, is that, talking about courage and looking at the pandemic. And it's been very interesting to start a foundation in Stoicism in 2018, which is remarkable that we got going, because even before then, Stoicism was on a global scale, on a fair significant uptick, and people were coming across it again and finding it very, very revealing about themselves and also where the world was at that time. Now, roll forward into the pandemic, and it's been very interesting to see Stoicism take, and the focus that we've had on the foundation has been remarkable because of a lot of people turning to Stoicism during the very difficult, challenging time of the pandemic. So some of the things that we're focused on during the pandemic is don't avoid it. It's very difficult. And March last year, I have 3 major business engagements here in London, and 2 of them, all 3 of them, when the first lockdown came, I was wondering how we would get through. Would the bank stay with us? Would we have enough liquidity? What tough decisions would we have to make? Would the customer still be there in any form? We faced into that reality. We don't try to say, woe is me. We turned into it immediately. Of all, we did the goalposts. First of all, we broke it into 3 phases. First, blunt trauma, absolute blunt trauma. This is going to be very difficult. We need to get through these next 2 months. Second, a consolidation period of, post the blunt trauma. There'll be no growth. Let's just make sure that we keep the businesses sound and can work through that. And then third, we're in that third stage now where we're coming out, and we can look to get back to where we were and start to look beyond that to get into growth. Interestingly enough, 2 of the business interests flourished during the pandemic, and one we had to just make sure that we were very close to and held on to all parts of the business in a much more a different way. And we made sure that we communicated to all those people very, very consistently, daily and often, so that they knew what was happening, how it was happening, and what the potential effect on them, because there would be effect on some people. And then we made sure that we were communicating from a Stoic perspective that we were going to make decisions for the greater good. We were going to protect as many people as we possibly could and work through the pandemic, and that we would make a decision, and we would make it. But we had to make sure that we made those right decisions on a consistent basis. And then through that period of the pandemic, we started to invest immediately back into people and differently. We had all sorts of wellness weeks. We had meditation brought in. We had yoga brought in. We had all sorts of different things. We invested in people because being locked down in London for a couple of months is not an easy thing, especially if you're a young person and you've never been in the workforce. So we reached out to different parts of our organizations differently to address the needs of people based on their circumstances. And because I'm very fortunate to have the people around with me, often that have been with me for years. We would come with our employees, come with ourselves, come with our banks, and we made sure that they felt like we knew what we could do when we needed to do it, even though we were in somewhat uncharted territory. But because we also went through scenarios where we predicted what might be the worst. And so we were able to look at all scenarios very carefully and manage ourselves very calmly. And once we had a grip on the situation, and some of it was pretty difficult and challenging, we made sure that we executed. and that comes into the all-important value of courage, which again I would reference towards integrity. Courage equates in my mind to the confidence to execute a very well thought through plan and to do the right thing. And we made sure that these were 8 principles that we kept referring to over the different phases of now. Right, before the Q&A, I talk about Stoicism in my own mind and how I think about it. And it's a reflection of someone that I heard speak at a fantastic global Stoic conference 2 years ago in Athens. It was the global event that year for a collection of the best minds in Stoicism and the best thinkers in Stoicism in the world. And one of those speakers was an ex-American senior military officer. And he was fascinating. He gave a speech and he gave a presentation of how the US military, particularly the special forces, does a lot of work of Stoicism with the individuals in those disciplines and different parts of the military. Why? They want those people to have a very high ethical compass, a very high moral compass. These people are in very stressful situations at different points in the career. They've got behind that trigger or their decision making as they're going forward. So he went on, and it was fascinating to see such a senior military figure who was at that point, now it was a civilian, talk about Stoicism and the use of the meditations and Epictetus and Seneca and otherwise. But he talked a lot about the meditations and things. And he showed an image not dissimilar to this one and said the great thing about Stoicism, it has stood the test of time. And it will continue to stand the test of time. And that really impacted me. And the way he used it was that 200 years from now on a space station out on the edge of this galaxy, the way technology is going, there'll be an astronaut or whatever that person's role will be at that point. And they'll be looking into an image like this. They'll look out into that image. And his prediction was, that person on that space station looking out into a view like this, he was betting that they'll have a copy of the Marcus Aurelius Meditations right beside him, because he finished his comment and his presentation like this. He said, when something's good, it's good. And I think he was right. I've listed some extra reading here and some sources, but we can distribute that afterwards. And then I would like to thank everyone for joining today's presentation before we go to Q&A.
All right. Thank you, Justin, so much for giving us that overview. And there's so much that goes into Stoicism and, really focusing on, we talked about courage and that being one of the big virtues. And one thing that I noted that was one of your the principles that you kept going back to during the pandemic, you talked about turning into reality. And that can sometimes be a courageous act in and of itself as well, to accept your current situation too. All right, I'm going to turn to, we've got a number of questions that came through, and I'm just going to fire away. Okay, Justin?
Super, Abby, great. Thank you.
So for those of you that are joining in, you can see the number at the bottom of our screen. You can text in some questions. I've got a few. I'm going to kick off one. Since I have the control of the Q&A, I get to ask one of my questions first. And Justin, you really introduced me to Stoicism. I actually have the Meditations book on my bookshelf behind me. And one of the things that I mentioned to you in the past, when I first got introduced to Stoicism, as a woman in business and as a female leader, I felt like it was just kind of a masculine term, right? And I thought, is this really for me? I don't know if Stoicism is right for me. And so my question for you is, as a woman in business and to our female students, how does Stoicism apply to them, or what guidance would you have for them, and how these principles can help them develop as leaders and professionals in their career?
Question. Clearly, Stoicism was developed, a couple of thousand years ago. So the context of history and the way things were, plays a role in the figures and so forth. But, the principles of Stoicism, I think, are very important on that particular point. First of all, that all people are created equal in the mind of a Stoic, and also everyone shares a common rationality, a common logic. Therefore, within that context, it starts. Therefore, from a Stoic perspective, it starts that man or woman, irregardless, it's a position of inclusivity, and so irregardless, man or woman, everyone starts from a position of rationality, and therefore there's no difference. The historical context is somewhat irrelevant.
Absolutely.
Would completely challenge any gender inequality. It is just absolutely wouldn't be acceptable for an aspiring Stoic. And we watch this space, Abby, because the foundation is working. Our advisor board is made up of 3 young women who are making their mark in London, in the city. We have Eve Richards, who's one of the founding members as well. And we're on a journey to bring Stoic women into our conversation on an ongoing basis. And in fact, we're sponsoring an event in June, an all-day event of women in Stoicism as well. So it's completely inclusive, ignoring the historical context.
Sure. I look forward to more information on that conference in June. This sounds really exciting, Justin. I'm going to move to our next question. And this one was submitted just a little bit ago. It says, what are the typical reactions to the business world when you share Stoicism and other philosophical beliefs? Is this something that the business world, are they open to these ideas?
Yeah, they are. I think, well, particularly at the moment, the foundation's had invitations to be involved in business in the United States, in Australia, in parts of Asia, in Europe. And I'm a member of the YPO organization, and a number of YPOs have got behind the foundation as well. We've got events we're planning on the West Coast for a whole bunch of different CEOs in May. We're heading to Sweden in the summer for a group conference up there. And here in London, in the last 6 weeks, we have done 5 wellness weeks for businesses that want to bring in, and it's twofold. One, the Stoic philosophy, and second of all, they want to invest in income. It's not, I'd say that, speaking, absolutely, and it often comes down to the individual. In fact, our wellness weeks are booked out to here in London till about the early part of June. So the business community here is on the front foot. And I'd suggest that with any sort of ESG strategy, which is also important going forward for any business, rest assured that Stoic thought would play very much a pivotal role in developing that ES strategy, because Stoics are environmentalists. They simply are. So there's a balance, but between the wellness perspective and the business perspective, and we have a number of conferences as well where we have senior one-day leaderships where people want to understand, if it's good enough for a Roman emperor to be a Stoic and that leadership style, it's probably okay.
Justin, we lost that last part. You talked about it being okay for a Roman emperor, and then what was your next comment?
Well, if it's good enough for a Roman emperor and that responsibility, then I think, the odd CEO could take a good look at it and say, well, there's got to be some good things in here, right?
Absolutely. Well, and I mean, when you talk about wellness and the environment, I mean, I can see how this plays all into it. At the end of the day, it's about doing the right thing. And that takes a lot of courage. It takes all of these virtues to facilitate that. So on the topic of those virtues, out of the 4, is there one that's been more difficult for you to practice than others over time?
I would, they all bring their different challenges over the period of the seasons of your life, and hopefully in maturity, I'll put it that way, that different parts of the Stoic philosophy become more relevant and more meaningful to you. The biggest, I I think the challenge for me over the years was making sure that, well, I'd rephrase in this way. They helped me build resilience, and building resilience and keeping a good eye on making sure that, yes, you wanted to progress business, but you wanted to do it the right way. And again, I'm very proud of Joe Easton and what they've done at ISN and other members of the ISN team, but also how it relates to the Eastern Center board. These are really good people that do the right thing all the time. And every one of them I'm very proud to be associated with. And they're keen on being ambitious. There's nothing the matter with ambition. That's great. It drives things, it creates things, it moves things forward. But there is someone like Joe it's just not in him. And that's as much the style of doing things really well and making sure that you're keeping an eye on moving the business forward as well. You know, if you look at if I say the one challenge for me was probably temperance. I'd have to say it was temperance. I think there was different times in my career I made a lot of emotional decisions. I could have moderated myself differently. Some of those worked out really well, but I had some big failures as well and made some significant mistakes where I could have been more temperate during certain decision-making processes or reaction to things. So if I could wind things back when I was a younger CEO, temperance would have been something I should have been closer to, I would say, for sure.
Okay. Well, on that same similar topic, we got a question that came in that said, what tips do you have for leaders to help them stay calm and focused, you know, practicing that moderation and courage when in a crisis that can help, I guess, manage those emotional responses?
Yeah, I think, you know, a lot of it, whether we like it or not, there's no substitute for experience. So, you know, talented people get to the right place eventually. I'm a great believer in that. So as you're going through and you know, Stoicism, one of the key states requirement, but a major piece of advice is to journal. So journaling is a very interesting thing to do from a personal basis, but it's also, you know, in the old days, everyone had a diary. But journaling is a reflection of your thoughts. And there's something magical in the fact that you can write things down and it not just something you remember, it seems to instill in a person differently the reflections. So I don't necessarily have the best advice of how to stay calm and focused, except, you know, that view from above. That most of the time now, it takes a lot. If I was giving one Stoic response to how to reflect on any situation, step away from it. You know, and we've done that during the pandemic. There were moments that were very critical, that we weren't sure. We delayed our decision making. We waited to see how things would unfold. We rose above the situation. We looked down. We're one tiny little thing in this whole gigantic disruption. Let's wait. So I think the view from above, which is a key Stoic tenet, is something that can give you the right perspective and also you then moderate differently to come to a decision.
Sure. That view from above. And I know in the Easton Center, we talk about everyone is allowed to take a timeout when you need it. You know, sometimes if there's a situation you feel like you need to walk away from or take a deep breath, a shameless plug for something we're talking about tomorrow, which is mindfulness. And Justin, you and I have talked quite a bit about the concept of mindfulness and using that as a practice. So moving into how our students can develop this, one of the questions that we received is, what things can students do to develop the courage trait? And I also jotted down, I love your concept of the daily gym of character development. So I think tying it into this question, when we are helping our students be and practice, you know, courage, what should they be doing in their daily gym of character development as a student here at OSU?
Yeah. Dr. John Sellers is a leading Stoic writer, thinker, author. He's a co-founder of the foundation. And we're both aspiring Stoics, but you wouldn't have two more different personalities, really different. So I'm a creature of habit. And so I have a daily discipline. And if I miss that discipline, I fall out of sync. And that is, waking up early, meditative time, exercise time, fasting, reflection. As I mentioned earlier, I start my day with something out of Aurelius and so forth. And then I go through my day and there's other touch points. And it's a continual review of any situation that now it's automatic that I kind of just drop down into my Stoic lens when I look into things. But it took time to develop that habit. So one of the things I'd be saying, anyone who's interested in Stoicism, if you wanted to make it part of your life, you have to go to work. You've got to decide disciplines and control your things differently.
Justin, I'm going to ask you
the way things. If I want to go,
will you repeat that? You broke up right before you were giving us the tip. Will you give us the tip over again?
Yeah, I think you have to treat it like you're learning anything. For some reason, Abby, it's amazing to me. We all expect to just wake up happy. Well, it just doesn't work that way. Some days we wake up and we feel fine and we feel great. Other days we don't feel that great. But I think if you've got a methodology to bring yourself to feel great, to feel content, to feel calm, then you got to go into the methodology. And Stoicism provides that methodology. And when you go into the business world, I don't have the right to bring my negative emotions into my team as a CEO on a daily basis. If I'm not feeling well, you've got to train it. You've got to figure out a discipline. Chris, you're touching on a little bit with mindfulness. How do you touch on a sequence of events daily that trigger your best? But you have to figure that out. What works for Justin Stead may not work for you, Abby, or for anyone else. But you have to find that thing. Now, John Sellers doesn't do any exercise, anything like that, whatever, and doesn't matter, whatever. But what he triggers when he needs to recenter himself, he reads. He just leaves the room and he reads. And that's how he reconnects with himself and his best Stoic self. So habits, self-awareness, and consideration, and repeatability. You got to repeat.
Yeah, the daily habits. I mean, what you just mentioned, it may look different for everyone, but figuring out what works for you and then developing that daily habit, developing that discipline can go a long way when practicing all of these skill sets. We've got time for 2 more questions. I'm going to ask one that's still on the topic of Stoicism, and then I'm going to wrap up with kind of a silly question about being a CEO. So for this next question, does Stoicism have a direct correlation to productivity in the workplace? Are you more productive if you are a Stoic? What does that look like?
Well, I'm biased, but the answer is yes. And one of the reasons I say that is because Seneca said it best. And it's a very, very powerful quote. It's not that we don't have enough time in life, it's that we waste it. So, and it's very true. And he summarizes it in one of his letters to Lucilius, that we've got lots of time, and a man's life, a woman's life, a person's life is, extending now to 70, 80, 90. You can accomplish a lot in life if you efficiently and keep up. Before in conversations I have 7 quadrants. Those quadrants changed over the years, but now I have 7. Anything else that comes up now that's not in the 7 is immediately discarded. So I don't waste my time. So I think Stoics are very zestful. We've proven that through our surveys over the last couple of years. We've shown that they're effective. We've shown that they move on quickly, proactively. They don't get stuck in the past, and they look forward in a very positive way. And they recognize the value of time and how important it is. So when I'm working with Stoics, boy, and especially on the foundation, things happen because we're all on that same value proposition of time.
Mm-hmm. you broke up a little bit in the beginning, but you talked about the quadrants and having 7 focused quadrants, right? Of determining where you're going to spend your time and energy. And outside of those 7 quadrants, it doesn't fit in. And I think that's a wonderful practice as well. So we'll wrap up with a bit of a sillier question that came in, which is, let me find it. How many hours do you put in a week as a CEO?
Do I have to really answer that?
It came in, Justin. I'm sure it's a very loaded question, and it varies quite a bit.
I bet you Joe Easton asked that question, didn't he? He asked that
I
question.
bet he did. I bet it was Joe.
Yeah, I bet he did. Yeah. I don't have the energy that I had in my 30s as a CEO or in my early 40s, but what I do have is experience. So, and I now in my career, I'm interested in smaller entrepreneurial ventures, working with great people, leveraging on my over the last 50 years plus. So, significant. Other days, I do what's required. So I don't center on time anymore, Abby. I center on effectiveness and what needs to be done. And life's been very good to us. We're very grateful. So I try to focus on what is required on the day to get the job done. But I've been very fortunate. I have great people around me, and the businesses that I operate in and invest in and co-invest in. We're a bunch of people that get things done. We really are, and I'm very proud to be a part of the groups of people that I work with.
Yes, great response. And at the Easton Center, we're a very close team, and we meet daily. And one of the things that we talk about each morning are what's your big 1 or 2 thing that you want to get accomplished today. How are you going to make an impact today? What's the thing that you want to be able to say at the end of the day, I was able to accomplish that? So it's more focused on the impact versus time necessarily. Well, Justin, I just want to thank you so much for taking your time to visit with us today. Our first Business Brews. It was a huge hit. We appreciate you joining us all the way from the UK. I know the time zone is a little bit of a challenge. I think you're getting ready you either already had dinner or you're about to have dinner. And we appreciate you so much spending your time with us.
Thanks, Abby. It's a great pleasure to be part of this kickoff. It's a great pleasure to be part of the Easton Center and everything that we're trying to achieve there. And again, I'm so grateful for the opportunity I had many years ago to Oklahoma State, and I'm a big supporter of Oklahoma State and always will be. And thanks again for the invitation today.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you everyone that joined, and tune in next month. The first Wednesday of every month, we'll be doing Business Brews, and we'll share more details soon. Thank you.